Over Time by John Sahyoun. Bulladila 2423. Narrated by Lex Marinos. I remember the first time I was caned in early primary school. It's not something I like to think about, but has endured in my brain for my subsequent decades. I was about 7 years old at school, and when I asked why, which in retrospect was pretty arrogant for the time, I was told that because I didn't stand straight enough at the assembly. In those days, almost 60 years ago, coming out of World War II and other near conflicts, it was about disciplining the body and exact allegiance to some goal or ideal. Our days were filled with the chant at assemblies, "I honour my God, I serve my Queen, I salute the flag." It may seem strange now, but that's how life was then. It was, as the past Prime Minister Robert Menzies said, "British to our bootstraps," and of the Queen, "I shall love her to the day I die." That was our cultural landscape. It was essentially monocultural, based on a European template, and almost exclusively English of how things should be, and a very narrow one in retrospect. Nobody really questioned why it should be otherwise. We feared the yellow peril and questioned people who were not like us. We found it odd when an Italian or Greek family set up a business in our neck of the woods. Fast forward a few short years to the very early 1970s. It was the smell of salt that filled my nostrils and the taste of hot chips that filled my mouth. It was all about who was the most brown at the end of summer and nothing else. Gone were the daily chants of the empirical mindset of the time. What remained of Empire Day was now replaced by the Queen's birthday weekend, and if nothing else, allowed us to destroy a couple of pile of clippings in a friend's backyard through the now long-dated use of fireworks. I think to a generation before me. My father and his elder sister came to Australia on an Italian cruise ship to meet their first cousin. They had left a war-torn Middle Eastern country for a better life here in Australia. But for them, it was a very different world in terms of language and culture. My aunt remarked many years ago that in order to create many of the recipes she was accomplished to, it was difficult to get the correct ingredients. She remarked that in those early days, the only way to get olive oil that was essential for many dishes was to buy it in small bottles at the chemist. Nowadays, you can buy the ingredients by the bucket load from virtually any supermarket. They also experienced language difficulties. My aunt remarked that she would go grocery shopping and ask for items with a single word like biscuit. I'd laugh at this, thinking that it would seem very quaint given our current context. I'm currently living in a small rural town about 100 kilometres from anywhere. I can get a Chinese, Australian or Indonesian meal any day of the week. A generation ago, I can recall a Chinese restaurant opening near me and I thought it was quite a treat. But no longer. Just about anywhere you can whet your appetite for any taste your heart desires. I think the days of the bronzed, chesty Aussie rising from the parched soil are honoured and remembered are over, and that's not a bad thing. We now celebrate a rich cultural diversity that continues to define the Australian character. I look at my son, who has the genetics spanning half the globe, and realise that this is our Australia now. Once to be feared, but now celebrated. Recently, I read that 30% of the Australian population was born overseas, each bringing with them a slightly different cultural background that contributes to our overall cultural matrix. Some years ago, when I was a teacher, there were groups being formed to study languages other than English. I was interested in teaching Japanese, which was all the go about 30 years ago. However, that group was full, and the only one being offered was Chinese. In those days, it was very much a minority language offering in schools. So I took it up and ended up as an educational consultant in this field. Fast forward 3 decades, and it is now the largest language group in the higher school certificate. Talk about a change in cultural attitude in half a generation. That's the great thing about Australia. Not only do we embrace our cultural diversity, but we also run with it to whatever outcome we can achieve. Nowadays, I can sit in the sun, enjoy the many advantages that having a diverse international cultural identity brings. Thinking, sipping on a wine from grapes sourced from more than a century-old import, and munch on my lunch that is anything but Eurocentric. I look forward to the International Day of the Country Women's Association, where they encourage in young children an investigation into other cultures that have contributed to our national character. Makes a great change from the usual scones, cream and jam in terms of food offerings. It teaches the up-and-coming generation about the diversity of our land and increases cultural awareness. More so with just about any other festival, they all raise cultural awareness, discourage racism, and encourage unity. As the Seekers sang many years ago, "We are one and we are many, and from all the world we come. We sing with one voice, I am, you are, we are Australian." Looking at the troubles in many foreign lands and their fighting about things long since abandoned, in Australia we celebrate the diversity that many different cultures have contributed in awareness of our unity and history to make this wide brown land the place it now is. The end.